Commander Kell stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil and watched the stars pass by like scattered diamonds. He had stood on this same bridge for 30 years. He had commanded this ship through battles that younger officers only read about in history files. His scales were now where they had once been dark green, and the scars on his face told stories that words could never capture. He was old by standards, but his mind was sharp and his instincts were sharper. They were known throughout the galaxy as the greatest warriors ever born. Their empire stretched across 200 systems, built on the bones of every enemy foolish enough to challenge them. Had been part of that expansion since he was barely old enough to hold a weapon. He had fought against the crystalline armies of the Collective. He had survived the poison wars of the Marsh Kingdoms. He had led the final assault against the machine minds of Sector 9. Nothing in the universe could surprise him anymore. He had seen it all. His second-in-command, Lieutenant, approached with a data tablet in her clawed hands. She was young and eager, still believing that war held some kind of glory. Had believed that once too, a very long time ago. "Commander, we are receiving a distress signal from Minor," said. "The colony is under attack." Turned from the viewport. "Who is attacking?" "The swarm." A cold feeling settled in stomach. They were not like other enemies. They did not fight for territory or resources or honor. They fought because fighting was all they knew. They were insects, each one the size of a warrior, and they moved in swarms that numbered in the millions. When they arrived on a world, nothing survived. They consumed everything, organic and inorganic alike, and then they moved on to the next world. "What is the status of the colony?" asked. Checked her tablet. Early reports indicate significant losses. The planetary defense grid failed within the first hour. Ground forces are scattered and disorganized. Command is recommending immediate evacuation of surviving personnel. Nodded. It was the logical response. Minor was a small colony, barely 50,000 inhabitants. It was not worth the cost of a full military engagement against the. Better to save who they could and abandon the rest. "There is something else," said. Her voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Sensors indicate the presence of a human trade delegation on the surface. Their ship was destroyed in the initial attack. 8 survivors confirmed." Made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had any warmth in it. Humans. He had encountered them a few times over the years. They were small creatures, soft-skinned and fragile, with no natural weapons and no significant military presence in the galaxy. They had appeared on the galactic stage only a century ago, and most species barely noticed them. They traded, they explored, and they stayed out of the way of the larger powers. That was the extent of their relevance. "What are our orders regarding the humans?" asked. "We have no orders regarding the humans," replied. They are not our responsibility. Focus evacuation efforts on our own people." Hesitated. "Commander, the humans are broadcasting on emergency channels. They are requesting assistance." "Many beings request assistance when they are about to die. We cannot save everyone." It was a harsh truth, but it was still the truth. Had learned long ago that sentiment had no place in warfare. You saved who you could, and you made peace with losing the rest. That was how you survived 200 campaigns without going mad. He returned his attention to the tactical display, watching the swarm patterns of as they spread across the colony world. The insects moved with terrible efficiency, following chemical signals from their hive queens. There was no negotiation with no diplomacy, no surrender. You either destroyed them completely or they destroyed you. "Prepare evacuation shuttles," ordered. "Coordinate with ground forces for extraction points. We leave in 6 hours." "Commander," his voice was strange now, tight with something could not identify. "You should see this." She transferred her tablet data to the main display, looked up at the screen, and felt his brow ridges draw together in confusion. The 8 human survivors were not moving toward the evacuation zones. They were not hiding in the ruins of their destroyed ship. They were not doing any of the things that made sense for beings in their situation. They were moving toward the— "What are they doing?" asked. Did not answer. He watched the small cluster of human life signs advance steadily toward a concentration numbering in the thousands. It was suicide. It was madness. No rational being would do such a thing. "Magnify the surface feed," said. The display shifted, showing a visual image captured by orbital satellites. Could see them now, 8 tiny figures moving through the burning streets of the colony. They carried salvaged weapons and improvised tools. At their head was a human female with short dark hair and a determined expression that recognized from his own reflection long ago. She was not running away from death. She was running toward it. "Commander, should we intervene?" asked. Was silent for a long moment. He had seen bravery before, countless times. He had seen soldiers charge into certain death for glory and honor and duty. But this was different. These humans had no duty to this world. They had no connection to the colonists. They had nothing to gain and everything to lose. "No," said slowly. "We observe. I want to see what they do." He leaned forward in his command chair, his old eyes fixed on the display. For the first time in decades, something stirred in his chest that felt almost like curiosity. The humans disappeared into the smoke and fire, heading straight for the heart of the swarm. Watched the surface feeds with an intensity he had not felt in years. The bridge crew noticed the change in their commander, the way he leaned forward in his chair, the way his claws gripped the armrests. They had never seen him so focused on something so small. The 8 humans moved through the ruined colony like ghosts. They stayed low, used the rubble for cover, and communicated with hand signals that required no sound. Recognized military training when he saw it, but something was wrong. These were not soldiers. The intelligence files identified them as trade negotiators, engineers, and diplomatic staff. Civilians. Yet they moved like a unit that had trained together for years. "Who was leading them?" asked. Checked her data. Age 34. Senior trade negotiator for the Earth Commerce Guild. No military service record. A trade negotiator. Almost laughed. A trade negotiator was leading 7 other civilians into a battle against thousands of warriors. It was the most foolish thing he had ever witnessed, and yet he could not look away. The humans stopped at the edge of a large plaza. Across the open space, could see them. Hundreds of crawling over the remains of a residential building. The insects were searching for survivors, their mandibles clicking in that horrible rhythm that haunted the dreams of every soldier who had faced them. And trapped inside that building, according to thermal scans, were 43 civilians. "They found survivors," said quietly. "How did they know?" Shook his head. He had no answer. The humans should not have been able to detect life signs without proper equipment. Yet somehow they had found the one building in this sector that still held living beings. Gathered her team around her. Wished he could hear what she was saying. He wished he could understand what drove these fragile creatures to throw themselves into the jaws of death for people they had never met. Then the humans did something that made his blood turn cold. They set fires. It started small, just a few flames at the edge of the plaza. But the humans fed those flames with chemicals scavenged from their destroyed ship. Within minutes, the fires had spread into a wall of heat and smoke that cut across the entire western approach to the plaza. The went mad. Had fought for decades. He knew their tactics, their weaknesses, their patterns of attack, but he had never seen them react like this. The insects broke formation, their movements becoming erratic and uncoordinated. They fled from the flames in blind panic, trampling each other in their desperation to escape the heat. "Fire," said softly. "They are afraid of fire." Commander looked confused. "We have never used fire against the—" "No, we have not." Felt something cold settle in his chest. They had fought for 3 generations. They had lost millions of soldiers, entire worlds, countless lives, and not once had anyone thought to use fire. The solution was so simple, so obvious, that it had never occurred to the greatest military minds in the Empire. These humans had figured it out in less than an hour. The wall of fire spread, and the scattered before it like leaves in a storm, led her team through the gap they had created, sprinting across the plaza toward the trapped civilians. Watched them breach the building, disappearing inside while the screamed and burned behind them. Minutes passed. The fire continued to spread, fed by the dry ruins and the chemicals the humans had planted. They pulled back from the entire sector, their hive coordination shattered by the flames. Then the humans emerged from the building. They were not alone. Carried a child on her back. The child was easily twice her size, but she moved without slowing. Behind her, the other humans supported wounded adults, dragging them through the smoke and ash. One human male, a large man with a bleeding wound on his forehead, carried two younglings in his arms, one under each limb. "They are saving them," whispered. There was something in her voice that had never heard before. Wonder, perhaps, or shame. The humans did not stop. They moved through the burning streets with their impossible burdens, heading toward the extraction zone that the evacuation teams had established on the other side of the colony. They had no transportation. They had no support. They simply walked, carrying aliens they had never met through a that should have killed them all. The communication array crackled with an incoming transmission, nodded for to accept it. His voice filled the bridge. She sounded exhausted, out of breath, and completely unbroken. "This is of the Earth Commerce Guild, broadcasting to any forces in range. We have 43 survivors and we are moving toward extraction point 7. We are bringing your people out. Cover us or stay out of our way." The transmission ended. Sat in silence. Around him, his bridge crew stared at their displays, watching the small cluster of human and life signs move slowly through the burning city. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. For the first time in 200 campaigns, Commander Kell had seen something that genuinely surprised him, and he had no idea what to do about it. The argument on the bridge was loud enough to echo through the corridors outside. "Commander, you cannot be serious." Lieutenant stood before with her scales flushed dark with agitation. "We have direct orders from Fleet Command. Evacuate personnel only. The humans are not our responsibility." "I am aware of our orders," replied. His voice was calm, but his claws had left deep scratches in the armrests of his command chair. "Then you know what happens if we divert resources to assist them. Court-martial, disgrace, possibly execution." His voice cracked on the last word. She was young, barely 60 years old. She had never seen a superior officer defy fleet command. "Commander, please, think about what you are doing." Turned to look at the main display. The human life signs were still moving, slower now, burdened by the 43 survivors they carried. They were regrouping. The fires had bought time, but fires did not burn forever. Soon the swarm would return, and when it did, the humans would die. All of them, along with every they had risked their lives to save. "Lieutenant, how many beings have we left behind in this campaign?" asked. Hesitated. "I do not understand the question." "It is a simple question. How many have we abandoned to the because rescue was too costly? How many colonies have we sacrificed because the strategic value did not justify the resources?" Did not answer. She did not need to. They both knew the number was in the tens of thousands. "And in all that time," continued, "how many alien species have risked everything to save our people?" Silence. Stood from his chair. He was old and his joints ached from too many years of war, but when he drew himself up to his full height, he was still an imposing figure. His officers watched him with wide eyes, uncertain what was happening. "The humans owe us nothing," said. "They have no alliance with the Dominion. They have no trade agreements, no defensive pacts, no obligations of any kind. We have ignored them since they arrived in this galaxy. We have treated them as irrelevant. And yet when our people were trapped and dying, they charged into the fire to save them." He looked around the bridge at his crew. Some of them had served under him for decades. They had followed him into battles that should have killed them all. They trusted him with their lives. "I have fought for 200 campaigns," said. "I have seen every kind of warrior, every kind of courage, every kind of sacrifice. But I have never seen anything like this. I have never seen beings risk everything for strangers who gave them nothing in return, and I will not stand here and watch them die." He turned to the tactical officer. "Launch, full combat support. Get our people on the ground and provide cover for the human evacuation." The officer hesitated, looking at. "Do it," commanded. "That is a direct order from your commanding officer. If there are consequences, they will fall on me alone." The launched within minutes. Watched them descend through the atmosphere, burning trails of fire against the darkening sky. On the surface, they were massing for another attack. The swarm had recovered from its initial panic, and now it moved with deadly purpose toward the small group of humans and survivors. His team had reached a narrow canyon that cut through the eastern quarter of the colony. It was a place where a small force could hold back a larger one. But even the best defensive position meant nothing when you were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. The humans took up positions at the mouth of the canyon. They had almost no ammunition left. Their weapons were damaged and unreliable. They were exhausted, wounded, and facing certain death, and not one of them ran. Watched a human male step forward from the group. The identification system tagged him as Danny Cole, age 29, communications specialist. He had a wife and 2 sons back on Earth. He had been on this world to help set up a new trade network. He had never fired a weapon in combat before today. Danny Cole positioned himself at the narrowest point of the canyon entrance. He checked his weapon, found it nearly empty, and set it aside. Then he picked up a metal pipe from the rubble and waited. "What is he doing?" asked. Did not answer. He could not speak. He understood exactly what Danny Cole was doing. They came like a wave of chitinous death. They poured into the canyon mouth, mandibles clicking, claws scraping against stone. Danny Cole met them alone. He fought like a man who knew he was going to die. He swung his pipe with desperate strength, crushing the skull of the first to reach him. Then the second. Then the third. The insects tore at him with their claws, opening wounds across his arms and chest, but he did not fall. He kept fighting, kept holding the line, kept buying precious seconds for the others to escape. They arrived just as Danny Cole fell. Soldiers poured from the landing craft, their weapons blazing. They scattered before the unexpected assault, and for a moment the canyon was clear. But Danny Cole did not get up. Ran to him, dropping to her knees beside his body. Could see her face on the display. She was crying. Not sobbing, not breaking down, just tears streaming silently down her face as she held the hand of a man who had given everything for people he would never know. The evacuation ships landed behind her. Survivors stumbled toward safety, guided by human hands. Stood, wiped her face, and returned to work. She carried a wounded child onto the. Her own wounds were bleeding freely, but she refused treatment until every alien was aboard. Watched it all, and something inside him that had been dead for a very long time began to stir. The medical bay of the Eternal Vigil was quiet. Most of the survivors had been transferred to the hospital ship that arrived 2 days after the evacuation. The human survivors remained aboard, recovering from their wounds under the care of doctors who had never treated their species before. Walked through the doors and stopped. Was sitting up in her bed, arguing with a medical officer about being released. Her left arm was wrapped in regenerative bandages, and there were healing cuts across her face, but her eyes were sharp and her voice was strong. "I am fine," she was saying. "I have work to do, reports to file, families to contact." Her voice caught slightly on the last word and knew she was thinking about Danny Cole's wife and sons. "You are not fine," the medical officer replied. You have 17 separate injuries, 3 of which would have been fatal without immediate treatment. You will remain in this bed until I say otherwise." Looked ready to argue further, but then she noticed standing in the doorway. The medical officer followed her gaze, saw the commander, and quickly excused himself. Approached her bed slowly. He had commanded fleets, negotiated treaties, and faced death more times than he could count. But somehow, standing before this small human woman, he felt uncertain. "Commander," said, her voice was polite but guarded, "thank you for the rescue. Your people saved our lives." "No," replied, "you saved our people. We simply arrived in time to save you." Was quiet for a moment, then she shrugged and winced at the movement. "We did what anyone would do." "That is not true," pulled a chair close to her bed and sat down, bringing himself closer to her eye level. "I have lived for 140 years. I have commanded soldiers from a dozen species. I have witnessed countless battles and countless acts of what others would call heroism. What you did was not what anyone would do. It was extraordinary." Shook her head. "It was not extraordinary, it was just right. Those people needed help. We could help, so we helped." "But why?" Leaned forward, his old eyes searching her face for something he could understand. "You owed us nothing. The Dominion has never aided humanity. We have never traded with you, never fought beside you, never even acknowledged your existence in any meaningful way. You had no reason to risk your lives for our people. Yet you did." Was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Do you know what my grandmother used to tell me when I was young? She said that kindness is not a transaction. You do not help people because you owe them. You do not help people because you expect something in return. You help people because they need help, and because helping is the right thing to do." Frowned. "That is not logical. Resources are finite. Energy is finite. Every action has a cost. To spend resources on strangers who offer nothing in return is wasteful." "Maybe," agreed. "By your logic, it is wasteful. But by our logic, it is the only way to live. We call it paying it forward. Someone helps you, so you help someone else. Or maybe no one ever helped you at all, but you help anyway because someday someone might need you and you want to be the kind of person who shows up." "But Danny Cole is dead." His voice was harsh, though he did not mean it to be. "He had a family. He had a future. He gave all of that up for he had never met. How is that right?" His eyes filled with tears, but she did not look away. Danny knew what he was doing. He made a choice. He decided that those children, those families, those strangers were worth more than his own life. And maybe you think that is foolish. Maybe you think he should have saved himself. But Danny would not have been able to live with himself if he had run away while others died. She wiped her eyes with her uninjured hand. "That is what makes us human, Commander. We do not always make the logical choice. We make the right choice, even when it costs us everything." Sat back in his chair. His mind was churning with thoughts he could not organize. He had spent his entire life believing that strength was the only thing that mattered. The strong survived. The weak perished. That was the natural order of the universe. But these humans were not strong. They were small and fragile and easily broken. By every measure they used to judge a species, humanity should have been insignificant. Yet they had done something that no would have done. They had charged into certain death to save strangers. They had fought against impossible odds with no hope of survival. And one of them had given his life without hesitation so that others might live. That was not weakness. That was something else entirely, something did not have a word for. "The High Command has summoned me," he said finally. "They want to know why I disobeyed orders to support your evacuation." His expression shifted to concern. "I am sorry. I did not mean to cause trouble for you." Shook his head. "You risked your life for my people. The least I can do is risk my rank for yours." He stood and walked toward the door. At the threshold he paused and looked back. "Thank you. You have taught me something I did not know I needed to learn." He left before she could respond. The tribunal chamber of the High Command was ancient. Its walls were carved from black stone from the heart of the, and its ceiling disappeared into shadows that seemed to swallow light itself. Great banners hung between the pillars, each one representing a victory in the long history of the Dominion. This was a place where legends were made and destroyed. Stood in the center of the chamber, alone. His uniform was immaculate, his posture straight despite the ache in his bones. Before him sat the 7 members of the High Command, the oldest and most powerful military leaders in the Empire. He had known some of them for decades. He had fought beside them in wars that shaped the galaxy. Now they looked at him with cold eyes and colder judgments. "Commander Kell," the High Admiral began, "you stand accused of disobeying direct orders during the minor engagement. You diverted military resources to assist non-personnel without authorization. You endangered your crew and your ship for the sake of aliens who hold no alliance with our people. How do you answer these charges?" Took a breath. "I do not deny my actions. I diverted resources to assist the human survivors. I did so knowingly and deliberately." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Such an open admission was almost unheard of. Officers facing tribunal usually fought for their lives with every argument they could muster. "Then you understand that the penalty for such disobedience is severe," the High Admiral said. "Depending on the judgment of this council, you could face imprisonment, exile, or execution." "I understand. And yet you do not defend yourself." Straightened his shoulders. "I do defend myself, High Admiral, but not with excuses or justifications. I defend myself with truth." He touched a control on his wrist communicator, and the holographic displays around the chamber flickered to life. They showed the surface of Minor, recorded from the orbital feeds of the Eternal Vigil. "These are the humans I assisted," said. 8 civilians, trade negotiators and engineers, with no military training and no obligation to our people. Watch what they do." The recording played. The High Command watched in silence as the humans charged toward the swarm. They watched the fires spread and the insects scatter in panic. They watched carry a child twice her size through burning streets. They watched Danny Cole stand alone at the canyon mouth, holding back a tide of death with nothing but a metal pipe and his own determination. When the recording ended, no one spoke for a long time. "I have served the Dominion for 114 years, said into the silence. "I have fought in 200 campaigns. I have seen courage and cowardice, victory and defeat, honor and disgrace. I thought I understood what it meant to be a warrior." He looked at each member of the High Command in turn. "I was wrong. These humans showed me something I had never seen before. They did not fight for territory or resources or pride. They did not fight because they were ordered to or because they feared punishment for refusing. They fought because people were in danger and they could help. Nothing more, nothing less." The High Admiral's expression was unreadable. "And you believe this justifies your disobedience?" "I believe this justifies everything." His voice was firm. "We have spent generations conquering the galaxy. We have built an empire on strength and discipline and the willingness to sacrifice the few for the many. But somewhere along the way, we forgot why we fight at all. We forgot that strength without purpose is just violence. We forgot that victory without honor is just murder." He gestured toward the frozen image of Danny Cole, captured in the moment before his death. This man had a wife and 2 sons on a world called Earth. He had never held a weapon before that day. He was afraid and tired and wounded. But when the moment came, he did not run. He stood his ground and he died so that others could live. Not allies, strangers. Lowered his hand. "I have killed more enemies than I can count. I have won battles that changed the course of history. But I have never done anything as brave as what Danny Cole did in that canyon. And I would not be worthy of this uniform if I had let him die without trying to help." The chamber was silent. The High Command members looked at each other, communicating in glances and subtle gestures that spoke of decades of shared experience. "We would hear from the human," the High Admiral said finally. "Bring her in." The doors opened and walked into the chamber. She was still healing, still pale from blood loss and exhaustion, but she moved with quiet dignity. She stopped beside and looked up at the High Command without fear. "You are?" the High Admiral asked. "I am." "The Commander claims that your actions on Minor were extraordinary. He claims that you and your people risked everything to save lives without any expectation of reward or recognition. Is this true?" Was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. "We did not do it for rewards. We did not do it for recognition. We did it because children were trapped in a burning building and we could get them out. We did it because wounded people needed to be carried to safety and we had legs that could carry them. We did it because Danny believed that every life matters, even the lives of people you have never met." She paused, and when she continued, there was a weight in her words that filled the ancient chamber. "Danny Cole left behind a wife named Sarah and 2 boys named and Little Ben. He will never see them again. He knew that when he picked up that pipe and walked toward the swarm. He knew he was going to die. And he went anyway because that is who he was. That is who we try to be." The High Admiral rose from his seat. He walked slowly down from the raised platform until he stood before. He was twice her height and many times her strength, but in that moment they seemed almost equal. "The Dominion has never formally acknowledged humanity," he said. "We considered your species too small, too weak, too insignificant to matter. We were wrong." He turned to address the full council. "Commander Kell is pardoned of all charges. His actions on Minor will be recorded as commendable rather than criminal. Furthermore, I move that the Dominion open formal diplomatic relations with Earth, effective immediately." The motion passed without opposition. 3 weeks later stood on a hillside on Minor. The colony was being rebuilt, and this small rise had been set aside for a memorial. Humans and worked side by side below, clearing rubble and raising new structures. The memorial was simple, a stone pillar with a name carved into its surface: Danny Cole, beloved husband, devoted father, hero. Placed an honor stone at the base of the pillar. It was a tradition among his people, a way of marking those who had earned respect through deeds rather than words. Beside it, someone had already placed flowers from Earth, bright and colorful, against the stone. Stood beside him, her arm still bandaged but her spirit unbroken. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." Shook his head. "Thank you. In 200 campaigns, I thought I had seen every form of courage the universe could offer. I was wrong. I had never seen beings fight for something as simple as kindness. I had never seen anyone die for nothing more than the belief that helping others is the right thing to do." He looked down at the honor stone, then up at the sky where stars were beginning to appear. "Danny Cole surprised me. You all did. And for an old soldier who thought nothing could ever surprise him again, that is the greatest gift I have ever received." Smiled through her tears. He would have liked that. They stood together in silence as darkness fell, 2 species who had been strangers learning what it meant to be something more.